Hello and welcome to yet another video on my channel. My name is Danielle Forrest and I'm an alien romance author and YouTuber. And today we're going to be reading Fated Mates of the Drakoan episode 14 titled Just a Little Light Stalking. So let's get started. You're doing the right thing. Those were the words Van had spoken as they'd both watched Jess walk away. They continued to ring through his head even now, hours later, as he lay in his bunk, trying to fall asleep. But sleep was an evasive bitch, and all he found himself doing was tossing and turning, tangling himself in his blankets until he had to straighten them once again. Davin huffed, then sat up and calmly rearranged the fabric until his own body weight wasn't tying his legs to the bed. He couldn't quite bring himself to lie down again, though. This was the sixth time in only a couple hours. There were many more hours to go before the sun greeted him once more. He looked over to the other side of the room where his friend was out cold. Van wasn't so much as moving a muscle, and Davin envied him that. He yearned for the bliss of oblivion, but that wasn't to be. He sighed, giving up on sleep, and carefully threw back the covers, not wanting to make a noise with Van only a couple feet away. There was no reason they both had to suffer from insomnia tonight. The bed creaked ominously as he shifted his weight. He hesitated, waiting to see if his roommate would wake. But Van didn't so much as twitch, so he continued. His bare feet made nary a noise in the quiet of the night, and after a few brief moments he'd collected his things and stopped in front of the door. Worried the door might wake Van, he looked back. He knew the door would make a noise when it opened. There was nothing he could do about it. He kept his eye on Van as he lifted his hand, activated it, and flinched as the control panel beeped. Then the door whooshed open. Davin held his breath. Several moments ticked by, but Van only took a deep breath, then settled in once more. Davin crept backward, relief washing through him as the door closed without incident, leaving him in the dimly lit hallway. He looked both ways, but wasn't sure where to go. He hadn't thought this through that much. All he'd been thinking about was the hours of restlessness that lay before him and feeling so uncomfortable. It was almost painful. He could go to the bridge, maybe check the mission documents, come up with a strategy. But after considering it for only a moment, he dismissed it. He was still suffering the lingering effects of his time with Jess. What could he possibly get done when his brain just refused to focus? But that didn't leave him a lot of options. The only places he could go were the bridge, the med bay, and outside. If he stayed inside, there was also the risk that he would wake someone. Sound tended to carry on vessels like this. Too much metal, too close confines. Hell, even on a big ship, the sound carried because everything was made of metal. The only places protected from it were patient rooms, which were soundproof to ensure adequate rest for healing. In fact, sometimes personnel would check themselves into the medbay just for insomnia. It was the only quiet place in the entire ship. He shook his head. I really can't think straight right now, can I? Here I've been worrying about making too much noise, but we're all used to sleeping in noisy places, aren't we? This is nothing. It was actually kind of funny, really. He shook his head, then headed toward the bridge, a slight smile on his face. And even though he knew it likely didn't matter, he carefully set his boots on the floor beside his seat before sitting down, just in case. Echoing silence and unnatural stillness of the night kept him sitting there, doing nothing for quite a while, and it even managed to distract him from the problem at hand. But soon enough, he was shaking his head and pulling up the display panel attached to the armrest to try to get some work done. He tapped away at the screen, trying to focus on reading messages, responding to them, giving orders, etc., but he kept having to read the same sentences over and over again. And when he went to type, he would find himself staring at the screen, his mind blank and unable to form words. Finally giving up, he pushed the display away and stared out the window, out at the stretch of greenery they'd parked in. In the dark, it seemed both striking and dangerous. There was an uneasiness about the view, like the shadows were shifting and creeping, threatening to consume everything in their path. And I sent Jess out into that. He shook his head. "Stop it," he whispered to himself sternly. "She's fine. Don't do this to yourself." But as he lifted his gaze back to the view outside, he couldn't help thinking about Jess, his mate. Her ample curves, her lean muscles, her tan skin, her long, soft hair. The way she feels underneath me. "Stop it." He took in a shaky breath. Where before the distance had given him a little bit of clarity to think, now it seemed to be working against him. Without her in sight, he had only his memories, what few there were. The air felt wrong without her scent in it, and without the distraction the others served. He could feel the full pull of her, like someone was trying to rip pieces off of him. What if she never made it home? What if she's not safe? This time, he couldn't quite bring himself to say, "Stop it," because he didn't know. Anything could have happened to her since she left his side. How would he know? He had no way of checking. You can check. He paused. Van would be pissed at him, for sure, but no one had to know, right? He could just make the quick walk to her place, make sure she was okay, then return. Quick and easy. Van and the team would be sound asleep in their beds. They would never miss him. He could be back at the shuttle long before anyone woke up. Easy. "Yeah," he said under his breath as he nodded to himself. "Easy." Davin stood up, collecting his boots from the floor, then silently left the bridge and walked down the hallway to the back door. He looked behind him one last time before opening it, just to make sure no one was awake. Just a quick check. Then I'll be right back. No one needs to know. When Davin arrived, he was relieved that her scent trail ran straight up to her front door, meaning she'd likely made it home safely. He then wandered around the building, but none of the downstairs bedrooms were hers, leaving his only options to assume she was safe or start climbing. "You did what you said you'd do, Davin," he told himself, but he couldn't quite bring himself to leave. Instead, he found himself standing in the road in front of her house, staring up at the edifice as his night vision distorted his view. Everything looked oddly stark, with little flares of heat highlighting against the duller backdrop. He counted 6 bodies in the house. Who were they? Was she safe with them? Then a chill wind swept over him and he shivered, his protective instincts flaring up. He took a step forward unconsciously, but then stopped himself. "No, I can't go in there." He clenched his fists, his entire body tense as the urge to go in and keep her warm held him in its sway. He needed to make sure she was okay, but he knew he couldn't. She wouldn't appreciate that. But he couldn't help wondering, was she warm enough? Did she have enough blankets? Was she shivering? As he scoured the building, he could see no heat sources other than sleeping people. She only has her own body heat to keep her warm. That's not right. She deserves better. His heart constricted as emotion struck him, freezing him in place. He should leave, go back to the shuttle, wait for his team to wake up. He shouldn't stand around outside her house making a nuisance of himself. It wasn't right, and he knew it. But he couldn't seem to get himself to budge. He could keep himself from moving forward, but he couldn't force himself to walk away. The longer he stood there, the more the cold night seeped into him and the more his more intrusive thoughts got the better of him. From the road, he eventually identified each of the 6 scent profiles in the house. 4 males. Correction, sorry. 4 females, 2 males. Scenting the males almost had his instincts overriding his sense, especially since one of the scents was familiar. It was part of Jess's scent, meaning the male was close to her, close enough to rub his scent off on her. But who was he? Why had he touched Davin's mate? Even though the two were clearly in separate beds and were probably nothing more than housemates, he imagined the two being intimate, touching, hugging, kissing, cuddling. His anger spiked with each intrusive scenario that popped into his head, even while he tried desperately to counter them with logic. But logic couldn't stop the thoughts from popping into his brain. Each thought further cemented him to the spot, preventing him from leaving all the more. Before long, the heat signature started to dim. Alarmed, he took a step forward, unable to stop himself as increasingly warm light gave extra dimensions to the place his mate called home. He could see the little bits of damage, the peeling paint, a tree branch that had fallen on the roof, and now, without being able to see Jess's heat signature, he couldn't quite stop himself from taking a few more steps forward, his feet taking him up and underneath her window on autopilot. His neck craned up as light and shadow played against the siding. Warmth touched his skin, but he barely noticed, just as he'd barely noticed the chill that seeped into his bones all night. All that mattered was making sure she was okay. All that mattered was Jess. All right, thank you for watching, whether that was live or on replay. I hope you enjoyed this, and please feel free to let me know, how did this go? Did you think this worked well as a format? Um, I know I've been doing this as an edited video instead of a live stream, so feel free to let me know in the comments, in the chat, etc., what you think, and if I should continue to do this way. The main reason for me wanting to do it this way was just because I wanted to be more consistent, and I find that it's easier to get myself to buckle down and do this for a live stream because it's already scheduled, and I just have to be prepared for the live stream. It's like being ready for an exam or something like that, you know. You can't control when the exam is going to be, and I feel like it's some kind of similar. Like, once I've scheduled the live stream, I'm set. I have to do it. But that's just the way my brain works with this. So I feel like this works better for me, but feel free to let me know what you think. Anyway, thank you for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. What did you think, and what do you think is going to happen next? Feel free to leave me a comment below. And that's all I have for now. If you like the video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell if you want notifications. And if you want to connect with me and my content in other places, you can always find links to my various social media accounts and where to find my stories online in the video's description. And if you're the type of person who just can't wait, you can get early access to my stories on, among other rewards, on my Ream subscription. Ream is 5 episodes ahead with Fated Mates of the Drakoan and is currently sharing my unedited whip of Match the Alien Workaholic. Until next time, if you're watching this on replay, I'm going to put some videos and stuff that you can watch on the screen. But until next time,